Hi, welcome back, everyone. This is Sherry Bennett, and it's Let's Talk Cannabis with Tara and Tom of Plant Alchemy. I first met Tom and Tara at our York Region Cannabis Symposium that we all organized last October the 10th, 1 week before legalization. I'm so thrilled to know you, and I'd just like you to take it over and introduce yourself. We'll start with you, Tara. How's that?
Thanks for having us, first of all, Sherry. It's
my pleasure.
To be here.
My pleasure.
Yes, so back in October, we were acquainted when we were pulling together the York Region Symposium for Let's Talk Cannabis. And we were really delighted to find a fellow educator and advocate, especially out here in the York region. We're still growing with that.
Right.
And it was great to come and be a part of the symposium.
Right. Tom, over to you.
Well, again, I'll just talk a little bit more. The symposium was great because, it brought together, I think, the first wave of people being able to openly talk about cannabis in the newly legislated environment that we've got here in Canada. And that's so important is every bit of education starts with just having that discussion.
Right.
People can ask the questions, they can get the answers. We can start chipping away at the stigmatization of the plant.
And I was so happy with the turnout that day. I don't know if you remember, but we had a man that came all the way from Manitoulin Island.
Yes.
And a woman that came from Penetanguishene, right? And they were from the Indigenous community, and who knows plant medicine better than those in the Indigenous community? So we were represented by them. We had a couple of police officers in the audience. Judge, I believe she was a justice of the peace, and several interested audience members. So it was a great day, right? It was a great day. So.
It really shows too just the breadth of impact that cannabis has. Again, getting away from stigmatization, we see that all age groups can partake and benefit. And, we're constantly reminded by all the news we digest for both our education programs and just also for our ongoing literacy, is that, for instance, it's wonderful to see seniors being a group that is one of, the most curious and is looking to displace pharmaceuticals and enhance their well-being. I mean, we were just at a meeting this morning talking with a woman who's 78 years old and vital, and she's interested to know more about the plant medicine. And, it's great every time we meet somebody like that because it just shows that there are so many unanswered questions that people are just aching to get out and understand.
Right. I don't know if you remember, but our keynote speaker that day was Dr. Michael Verbora.
Yes.
Yeah. And he has a patient, I think he's treated over 3,000 patients over the last couple of years.
I'm sure it was 3,000 and something on the day of the symposium. I'm sure it's only grown since then.
It's only grown. So his youngest patient is 6 months old, and oldest patient, I think he said 104. So it's here to stay, and cannabis is medicine. So tell me, please, a little bit about Plant Alchemy. I know a little bit about it, but I'd love to learn more, and I want to take your online courses eventually. Tell us about that, would you?
So Plant Alchemy actually was a seed that was planted, I'm going to say back in 2010 when my brother Michael was diagnosed with Lou Gehrig's disease, or ALS. Right. And of course, during that time, we were surrounded by teams of doctors, lots of different medications coming down as Michael went through the stages of the illness. And throughout that time, Tom and I were researching alternatives for all of the prescriptions that he was on because there were some horrible side effects, but also the prescription medications were not successfully addressing some of his deepest needs and concerns as he was going through this illness. So we started researching a lot about cannabis, and although there wasn't too much research specific to ALS, the research that we did uncover was very positive, and we know since then it's only grown. And we applied to be medical growers for Michael, and successfully we're growing for him a strain that addressed his anxiety. Of course, you're living in a body that is shutting down systematically, and you have no control over it. Huge anxiety. Of course, then sleep issues. If you're that anxious about not knowing what's going to happen, you can't really sleep as well. Depression and appetite as well, because he was on puree food for 5 years. So it was through all of that that we really saw the benefits of the medicinal side of cannabis. And I myself come from a background of being a teacher and steeped in mindfulness. And I've had a lifelong relationship with mental health problems such as depression and anxiety. And so I started looking at the effects that cannabis was having for Michael, and I thought, okay, this has to work for myself as well. I also deal with significant menstrual cramps and IBS as well. And when I started blending mindfulness and cannabis together in my own daily practices and taking an intentional medicinal approach, things really started changing for me. And it was from that we decided that we were going to grow PlantAlchemy. So Tom's background.
Well, and interestingly enough, for me, cultivating the plant for Michael was a real eye-opening experience, because as an engineer, I love to dig into the nitty-gritty of everything, look under the hood.
You have to understand it. You have to understand it all, too, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it gave me a whole new learning pathway to go down, with everything from nutrients to lighting to all the environmental factors that then help you craft a product that then is suited to the end need of whatever it is.
Now, safely.
Safely, without pesticides,
safely.
without other elements like that, without any other attributions.
Right.
Now, I myself am blessed with the fact that at over 50, I don't have any aches or pains or issues like that, but I found that cannabis was really interesting as a tool for my own creativity and productivity. A lot of what I discovered for myself was the aspect of microdosing and being able to use strains in small amounts tailored to what kind of outcome I'd like to have. Do I need to focus my creativity today on a big branding project for a client?
Right.
Or do I need to really get into some coding and work on a new web platform? Any of those things, I found different strains would help with the mental environment.
Right, focus and productivity.
Of that end, or
Right.
free-flowing creativity, unbounded semantic priming, where all the words flow from your brain much easier.
Isn't that fascinating?
So, I found that, in my experience, it was marvelous to have it as a enhancement to some of the things that I enjoyed doing in my professional life, but that brought me even more satisfaction and success as a result.
Right.
And being a medical cannabis consumer yourself, Sherry, from a PTSD point of view, I'm curious to know from you, other than addressing, I'm sure, nightmares, the physical symptoms, the psychological, the emotional symptoms that come with that, and how that can, once it's addressed, these types of matters and solutions-based thinking, being able to converse better even.
Exactly.
How is that?
It's huge. In my personal experience, we were just talking about it at a break. Cannabis has, I believe it has saved my life. Because those of us that live with post-trauma or PTSD, a significant percentage of us die by suicide because we can't tolerate the nightmares, the flashbacks, and the anxiety off the Richter scale. It's not a pleasant way to live. And then there's sleep disruption too,
Yes.
and you can't heal from anything, as I've said before, if you don't get a good night's sleep. So, and I was taking, I would say, I tried every antidepressant that I couldn't tolerate, even in minute dosages. But what they do for post-trauma is they give us Tylenol 3s, or opioids. They give us sleeping pills, tranquilizers, and antidepressants. And so I've been taking medical cannabis every single day for the last 3 years, with not only significant results, I would say superior results, in contrast to the benzodiazepines and antidepressants. And I believe cannabis makes one feel friendly with life again. You don't want to kill yourself, or you don't get depressed to the, to the
You
point.
see the
To
possibilities.
the point of, and also, I think I am able to look at things in a different way, and in a calm, focused, productive way. My brain isn't all over the place anymore, and I no longer live in fight or flight mode. I mean, I do have the odd fright every once in a while, but my symptoms have been so highly diminished. No, I did make the point before that I have THC in my system every single day without impairment, actually, and I will have THC in my system for the rest of my days here. Yes. I choose to use it, whether I have pain or not.
Well, and especially because, what we're really talking about here is a return to homeostasis.
Yes.
It's not about, in a lot of pharmaceutical cases, a quashing or suppressing of symptoms.
Right.
It's about realigning your entire endocannabinoid system so that you are in a homeostasis, not newly suppressed emotions or suppressed anything.
And that's why I say this plant is medicine, period. Yes. Whether one takes it recreationally or for medicinal purposes, your body doesn't know the difference. It has the same approach, or it's like one has better health outcomes by taking cannabis than the alternatives.
I would totally agree with that. We were just speaking to a gentleman this morning. Now he's currently using CBD to manage stress. And he also was referring to the fact that he was on prescription medications prior to and had difficulties with side effects that were happening from that, which is why he was looking for alternatives. And so we had this really interesting conversation that, again, yes, the research that's coming out, both from Canada, although we're still in the initial stages, but also all of the states that legalize both recreational and medical, and how that balance of prescriptions going down with the legalization of cannabis and the use of cannabis. And the fact that yes, we are getting back into, you see, the prescription is that pop and go prescription mania is what we call it. It's the formulaic thing. And as human beings, if we're just looking for the formula, we're missing the living. And I think what you're addressing there, Sherry, this reawakening to life.
Right.
Tom and I are on a mission as well to talk about it in terms of medicinal use, but instead of recreational, relational. And what I hear from you is that it is that relational aspect, and relating meaning, how do I connect to myself? How do I connect to those around me, to the food I'm eating, to the earth I inhabit?
Sure.
And I think that that's a really important point about this, because it is a plant medicine.
It is a plant medicine.
Regardless of whether you're using it for enjoyment or for any kind of relief.
People would have much better health outcomes, as I've said. I don't believe it's a cure for anything, but I sure believe that it minimizes suffering, and people will have better health outcomes if they take it rather than alcohol or tobacco or opioids, for instance. So this is such an exciting time to be in right now. But do you find a lot of dinosaurs in your walk? Do you find a lot of people that just don't get it yet?
So yes,
I like to call them dinosaurs. Sorry.
Well, no, that's fine. Again, from this morning, we were just meeting some people who come from old stigma perspectives, I would say. And I think that we have a long way to go to taking education, not just about this is the cannabinoid I am taking, this is what it does in my body. Yes, that's very important and instrumental. But in addition to that, the education piece is on moving past stigma. And we've energetically taken that on. It's been an illegal substance for decades now. So we really have some conscious undoing of that stigma.
Yes, we do.
Yes.
90 years of it. Really.
Well, and I got to admit, I love to talk to everyone. I love to see these people who approach very determinedly, like, cannabis, eh? And it's like, great, tell me, what are you thinking? Like, it's actually
I say, bring it on.
Wonderful to hear and engage with these people, because it helps us better understand the mindset and how to converse with those kinds of people as well. I welcome anyone to a conversation. And, we have found that, too, there can be people who approach it with very sort of standoffish nature, but you start having a conversation about, not just the plant, but the self-empowerment that comes with using it and observing yourself and being in that participative kind of relationship with the plant.
Right.
I think people are not used to that either, and that's where that needs to change and awaken, that we can't just always put our trust in somebody with a lab coat on to say, well, you know what's best for me. Ultimately, we deep down inside know what's best for ourselves, and this is a chance for us to expand beyond the I'll just listen to some authority speak versus what can I do for myself? And hopefully that kind of attitude and participation with cannabis can open the doors to that sort of behavior with all things in your life as well.
Right,
I
so
think
important.
too that we're going to see changes as continued legalization of new products are coming down. You know, we have edibles and topicals that are going to be coming
in
out,
October.
right? And that gives people such a broader range of consumption methods. Traditionally, again, you know, if you go back to our youth, you know, you might smoke a joint or a bong or a hot knife or something. This is really what was around, and this is what people spoke about. It's so different now. Yes, some people may choose to vape or smoke cannabis, absolutely, and work with the flower that way. But now that there is going to be so many more options for that, I think people's eyes are going to open up and say, oh, my narrow focus and all the propaganda that I took in for decades, really, that's not what the offerings are now. And I think I need to wake up and really listen and understand.
And use their critical thinking skills,
Yes.
really. That's what's missing a lot of times. Right?
It's
People
missing
just don't
in
think
general in a lot
general.
of cases.
Yes.
And this is
People don't think critically.
Yeah.
In
really.
life, in general, that's right.
I guess
Yes.
that's true. And I believe so strongly that the difference between medicine and poison is dosage, right? So that's why
yes.
it's so important for people to understand what they're taking. And I'll be speaking, I think I told you, to a number of retirement residences, and because some of them have trouble with seniors taking a piece of a brownie or a cookie somehow, and they don't realize they can't take as much THC, so they end up in an emergency room. They don't know they'll never die from that, but it sure feels like it, because if you take too much, it can cause anxiety, and one really needs to understand their own body, and that's why your course is just it's a wonderful gift to humanity, actually. So we have to get more people to find out about that. And how do you plan to do that, and how do you structure it? How are we going to tell people about your online course that you could take?
Well, I think one of the things...
And why would one want to do it?
Well, why would somebody want to do it? I mean, we've always both been very much embracing of lifelong learning. The whole idea that you never really stop learning regardless what field or lifestyle you're in. And for us, this is one more chance for people to get a better understanding about their own well-being, about a plant that, doesn't really need any processing to be able to interact with your body and have a natural connection. I mean, I think we've seen how, once people learn a few facts, like the fact that your own, naturally produced cannabinoids work just like the plant cannabinoids to a large degree, that people are absolutely fascinated that a plant can work like a neurotransmitter in your body, and that we were naturally set up to do that. It's not like we're putting a foreign substance in our body. It's something that our body is there ready to accept. And I think once we start awakening people to that, then they do want to know more. In terms of the learning, right now we've launched our budding knowledge course, which is cannabis basics, but it's focused on both the informational side, so how your body works with cannabinoids and terpenes and flavonoids, but we do specifically focus on kind of the three key regions that most people are concerned about in terms of sleep, stress management, and chronic pain. Because these are in statistic after statistic, we see that you look at the element of sleep deprivation and sleep problems. It's horrible in North America, and probably globally. We've focused mostly on the North American market because that is an area that sort of has a consistent statistical sort of rendition to it. But at the same time, people need to see that there are options, because, again, it's about changing the language, changing the dialogue. We talk about pharmaceuticals and we talk about side effects. Well, it's an effect, plain and simple, that you may get kidney stones or that experience liver damage. It's not an accident that's happening. That is unfortunately part of what's built in. Whereas, you made a good point earlier about, safety and efficacy, and that with pharmaceuticals, people are overdosing quite regularly on medications unintentionally, and yet with cannabis, you can never really overdose on it. Yes, you can have a bad experience and just maybe think that you're dying or something like that, but again, what we're trying to do is bring mindful consumption practices to our education program, not just in the sense of teaching people about cannabis and its components, but how do you partake in it in the best way for your best outcomes.
Right.
So this is where Tara's education background really helped in letting us create a really robust platform of material.
Well, I think it's important to empower the learner. And so all of the education that we put out there, be it in-person workshops, talk series, or our online education programs, it really is about providing the tools to empower the learner. So you include things like journaling experiences, because if you take the formulaic approach to learning, you're going to get the formulaic response. If you take a holistic approach to the learning, then you are empowering the person, because suddenly they don't just remember a fact or a figure. They remember that in relation to an experience in their life.
How it affected them.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And this is how we're making connections. Now, we've also developed a series of guidebooks on how to manage sleep, stress, and pain matters. Specific journals, patient journals for each of those conditions that have little tweaks to them that are all different, so that you are tracking this, so that you are collecting your observational and data-driven information to be able to have awakened and truthful conversations about what's working, right? Mm-hmm. Or what isn't working, what needs tweaking.
Do you think your courses would be appealing to the elder population or the seniors, those over 65? And
yes, I do.
Does one need a computer to take those courses?
Well,
one needs to be computer savvy to take those? I'm just asking.
For budding knowledge, if you're
Yes.
referring to budding knowledge
Yeah.
specifically, yes, you do have to have some computer skills there. Thanks for asking that. However, there are a few avenues that we can work with folks. Yes, it's the individual and consumer, but it's also on a training basis as well. So industries out there, perhaps retirement villages, or as retail begins to develop and more training opens up beyond just the AGO and MAD training.
Right.
LPs, we've been talking to medical clinics as well, and they really want to have more robust educational experiences for their patients.
Right, it's so important, and I just thought of this right now. I have to say that over the last 3 years, I've tried I think 14 different licensed producers.
Wow.
Yeah, because I wanted to, in order to teach others.
Sure.
No, and I have all the empty bottles there too. I was going to show samples or get our camera wizard there to show, but unfortunately, since legalization, there were packages or oil. I would take cannabis oil and capsules and dried flower. Mm-hmm. The containers they were very well labeled, and one could tell the difference between THC and CBD.
Yes.
Since legalization now, they have to have this standardized packaging, and it's very, very difficult now for me to tell what's different, like what's THC and CBD for these particular gel caps that I take in the morning, and I think that's dangerous. I mean, the whole there's a lot of things that went wrong with this legalization, and I'd just like to touch on that too, because it's very important. I get asked this all the time. What's going on here? Like, what is going on? Really, I can't, like my elder people do not want to go to the government store to get it because they're concerned that their privacy will be compromised. And they won't be able to go to Florida for the winter because the U.S. border will have some issue if they're found. Some people don't like the government cannabis because it arrives like 2 days later through the mail, and it could be moldy or it could not be. Who knows how long it is, how long it's been in storage there. There are layers and layers of issues with regard to access now, and I've heard people say that really the government didn't legalize this plant, they just added 45 new laws and different packaging regulations. And what's your take on, like, what's different since October 17th in your impression?
So Prohibition 2.0, really.
Yeah, Prohibition 2.0, really. Prohibition 2.0. We should write about that, Sean, one day. Right?
I think just to still go back to the seniors, point well taken about packaging. I mean, that is so important, that not only access to the medicine, just physically accessing what you need, accessing the information you need, is being hampered by some of the laws that are in place right now, which understandably were the result of, I think, people not well versed in cannabis trying to implement a lot of care and caution in this sense. Now, again, our main goal is to get people talking to one another, just as you are. By educating, we want people to go out and talk to others about their knowledge and direct them to courses or have conversations with them. Understandably, yes, especially in the senior population, you can't expect them to necessarily all get on a computer and work their way through a course like ours, but at the same time, we want people, say, if their adult children take our course, they can then have a conversation with their parents from an informed point of view.
I would like to have it on
or
Friday
participate
nights.
with their parents.
Yes, I'd like to have movie night at a seniors residence or something at all these, so that they can gather the community and watch a series of educational. They're always looking for something to do. Like we'll think about that, right?
Well, absolutely, and it's something interesting about the senior population too, is that they lived through the same sort of approach with tobacco, with alcohol, right? And the packaging issues and compliance issues, etc. Now, what was really interesting about that, it takes forever to move a giant boulder, doesn't it? And it took forever to get some things in place that needed to be in place for harm reduction and safe consumption, or safer consumption. Let's face it, there is no safe consumption of tobacco.
No,
for instance,
not
right?
at all, no.
And we're learning more and more that alcohol, it's a poison, flat out. However, it's gone too far now. So now we have to bring it back the other way when we're dealing with cannabis, because it does not have the same detrimental health effects that tobacco or alcohol do, and yet they are being treated the same way. We were reading an article the other day about a retailer, I believe it was from Burlington, who was saying, Amazon's eating my breakfast, lunch, and dinner because you can go online and buy a vape, and if you don't like it, you can return it, no problem. Here in my store, I cannot even show you a vape until you have purchased it. Now, if you ask me, that is harm-inducing.
Good point.
If you are going to tie the hands and mouths and cut off communication of how to use something effectively,
good point.
Then we are in fact increasing the chances of harmful experiences.
I agree.
If people don't understand what a 100 milligram THC brownie will do to them, and they consume too much of that and have a horrible experience, unfortunately, that's also the thing that the media loves to jump on and broadcast, that, somebody had a really bad, they had to go to the hospital because they ate too much cannabis. Well, how did that happen? That's always, we always like to see, okay, a bad experience is you don't want to see it happen to people, but how can these be learning experiences in terms of what went wrong with communication, understanding, just anything in the chain of from when that thing was purchased or given to that person to when they consumed it, or
what's the chain of custody? And,
so but at the same time, like Tara was saying, you've elevated things like alcohol to a complete lifestyle type of milieu, whereas ironically, you're touting a physical poison that is going to, especially summertime, get out there on the patio and drink, but yet don't pull your vape out in public places. We don't want to see any joints around this establishment, things like that. So again, you're continually sending the message with these kind of regulations that no, it's still really an evil substance. We're just kind of glossing over that by letting you have it. It's so
unfortunate, and really the children have access to the children. Okay, so we say that yes, it's not good for developing brains under the age of 25, but I guess we're all given our driver's license at age 16. We're able to consume alcohol at age 18 or 19 or something.
Depends on the province.
We're able to join the police force and have a gun at age 18 or go off into the military. So I do believe that it's not good for underdeveloped brains unless you have 300 seizures a month.
Yes,
or
there are
if you have
medical
a child
necessities.
With cancer or a child with autism, for instance. Or a child that has trouble focusing. For some kids, they need to be able to focus, and it helps them focus, and it helps their productivity.
One of our daughters has a license for CBD at 14 for her anxiety.
Right.
Because unfortunately, one of the first things she was offered was benzodiazepines at 14 years of age. And said, wait, hang on a second, before all the psychiatric, and there were other psychiatric drugs that were already on the table. But we pulled back on that and said,
you.
okay, let's talk about what could help here. And CBD
Right.
is one of those things that has been beneficial for her, but she had to get licensed to get that. And
it
that
was a
took
long,
time.
arduous process.
Yes.
Yes.
And yet far less harm to a developing
Yes,
teenager
right.
than benzodiazepines or other
Or
psychiatric
alcohol
drugs.
or tobacco. And yes.
Look, I think it's about having conscious, heart-centered conversations with our
Right.
generations, be it
Right.
our aging parents or our children that we're raising.
Right.
And what kind of new generations do we want to foster? Do we want to foster the, follow the law to the letter, even though the law does not know about what is right and what is wrong in terms of the research? Do we want to listen to the politicians whom may or may not have a hidden agenda of whether they are going to approve things or not, according to who's putting money in their pocket, whose favors they owe, but also just down on connected to our living experience. What do you as an individual want? And if you are speaking from a belief that came from I don't know where and I don't know when, does it have a place in today's society? You have to talk to your kids about that. If you shadow them from it, they're going to go out and experience it anyway.
Sure they will.
And so why
Didn't we all?
not have?
Why
Yes,
not start-
exactly.
Why not start it early and
Yeah.
start the education early?
Yes.
I was saying before in a previous segment that my whole wish is that people will encourage the children to grow up to be chemists and learn how this plant, be horticulturists, learn how to grow it correctly, be doctors. Let's flood our med system with good quality, research and young kids that want to study it.
Yeah.
Because we were saying before that the reason most doctors are not taught about the endocannabinoid system in med school is because it was only just discovered in the early 1990s. So that's going to change. More and more doctors, but right now they're learning from their patients, and we have to get the word out there. So we're doing that.
I think we always have had very open conversations with our children. They're 3 of the 4 of them are all adults now, but at the
Yes.
same time, we kept it very open to discuss, okay, what's been happening. And when you do that, then you find out a lot of things with respect to peer groups and usage patterns amongst teenagers
Sure.
and things like that. And they're when they don't feel threatened, they will open up and discuss what they're seeing, what they're feeling, what they may have been pressured about, and things like that. And in the end, I think one of the funniest moments was when one of our sons said, "Oh yeah, that feeling when your dad knows more about weed than you do." It's like, thank you very much. But that is the kind of environment we want to have, where they will never fear coming to us to ask a question.
I think it's more important than ever now, because now it's actually, we're dealing with life and death situations.
Yes.
When we were growing up, there was not, was imminent death from fentanyl was not around there.
That's right.
And so now, with 11 Canadians every day dying of opioids, we need to really, really hammer this home. The politicians are worried about, what about the children? We have to protect the children. Yes, we need to protect the children from fentanyl and from opioid overdoses, and they need to be educated. And
Tom was just talking about an article as well that he had read on Ritalin and Adderall.
Adderall for ADHD or ADD.
It had to do with the issue of course, one element in the cannabis discussion that comes up periodically is the issue of psychosis.
Yes.
And that does cannabis induce psychosis?
Yes. Right.
As far as we've seen in the research so far, if you have a family history, some people don't even realize they have a
Pre-existing
sort of an undercurrent that may have not reared itself until they have a significant amount of cannabis.
Right.
It can sometimes do that, but again, we're talking about a fairly narrow slice of the population. Right. But I was surprised to see stats that indicated that between what was the Ritalin and Adderall, that each of them had definitive amounts of psychosis-inducing potential.
Sure.
With Ritalin, it was about 1 in 660 will develop a psychosis, and this is with no previous psychosis.
Right.
And Adderall. So with Adderall, with Ritalin, it was actually twice that rate.
So these are mixed salts and amphetamines, I believe.
They are basically
and
amphetamines.
So that's
yeah.
okay to take to school, but cannabis isn't. So kids eventually will be needing to take their meds, cannabis meds
Yeah,
at school.
yeah.
And there are some around now that kids are authorized to take medical cannabis, and they have to get it from the school nurse, it's coming. I also did see a company, and we're never going to talk about how to make money in the stock market or anything about really money in cannabis. We're talking about the human component,
Absolutely.
the human component of this plant.
Cheers to that.
And I'm just saying that I would like to see it in long-term care facilities. It will be here, and in end-of-life care, in hospice, palliative care situations. And I did come across a company in Israel that is already making pre-measured doses of dried cannabis for use in hospitals and long-term care. So I think that's a good thing. So pre-measured doses, because what's going on, the big problem in the media is smoke. Smoke and impairment. People are afraid. There's hundreds and thousands of people driving around impaired. So I think that more and more people, well-functioning professionals that come forward and talk about it, I think over time the stigma will subside.
Yes.
But it sure seems like a long way. But I think really now we have to really understand cannabis, respect it as medicine, and know that it's harm reduction.
Yes.
It's harm reduction. It doesn't cure everything. It's not a cure-all for everything, but it does minimize suffering, and it does not kill 11 Canadians a day like opioids. Right? So we're going to have to start talking about it. And I'm going to talk about it to the end of my days right now, because like I said, it gave me back my life. And I believe that, the doctors are coming around, and there's some really, really good doctors who specialize in cannabinoid medicine now, and nurse practitioners. So that will, I want our schools to pump them out, and we encourage our children to grow up and learn the science behind it.
Well, and I mean, you can't argue even,
yeah.
When you read stories about how on the East Coast now, with a lot of licensed producers increasing their size of their production facilities and that, the employment scenario in some of these towns, which was so desperate, like 60% unemployment, this has given people a new lease on whether they're cannabis consumers or not, working for these companies and being involved in this burgeoning industry, and really revitalizing a lot of areas too, which is very heartful to see.
Right.